What is going on, everybody? Welcome back into another edition of the Fan Committee Football Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Joe Tooman, as always, joined by my co-host, Michael Herrera. Mike, last night we got a huge Thursday night football game to kick off Week 2. We're going to be talking about Week 2, previewing it, all the games this week on this episode. But starting with last night's game, the Chiefs beat the Chargers 27-24. A lot of crazy things went down in this game. What was your biggest takeaway from this AFC West matchup?
Well, two big takeaways. I think the Chargers are legit a good team. So, I think they're definitely, as of now, the second best team in this division. I think that Patrick Mahomes doesn't know how to play against the Chiefs. You know, like this isn't the first time we've seen him kind of drop the ball. But I think he played. I think it's more the Chargers have a really good defense though. So.
Yeah, I think it was really interesting to see that Mahomes, he kind of struggled out there last night, only 230 yards. He did have 2 touchdowns, but, he kind of just was heaving the ball around and got lucky a couple times with those big completions to Justin Watson for the touchdown, as well as Kelsey on that 50-yarder that set them up. Maybe not 50-yarder, but that long ball that set them up in the red zone. Other than that, a lot of people were talking about the dropped interceptions, and granted, Herbert actually did throw an interception, but we saw a lot of either interceptions called back or the Asante Samuel Jr. one was a big one. Did you think that was an interception? Do you think he dropped that?
The interceptions that they called back, I do think should have been called back, but there were some flags regarding other things that were thrown later in the game that I think were kind of questionable. The Asante Samuel, when he dropped it, he bobbled the ball and it hit the ground. So it's a drop. Also, there's another play where people talking about how the PI got called on the defense, although they kind of both got kind of tangled up. So it really could have gone either way. So that's kind of one of the questionable calls. But I think the interception should have been called back because either a penalty occurred or the Asante Samuel and he dropped it. So what are you gonna do?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Samuel dropped that. I mean, we've seen this rule, we've been talking about the catch rules for a decade now in the NFL. I think at this point we kind of know how it works. I don't think he caught that either, but it just goes to show that if these plays were made, if he did catch it, this game could have been a lot different for the Chargers. The other big talking point, Justin Herbert late in the game got killed by, I believe it was it Mike Dana or someone? I forget. But someone laid a big hit on him, and it looked like he was hurt. But then what happens? Granted, this wasn't enough. It was too late. They had already pretty much were down 2 scores. But that last second drive to make it a 3-point game, that DeAndre Carter completion, Herbert was just gutting it out. And I really love Herbert. He's such a gamer, as they say. I thought this was an amazing performance from him all around. I think he outplayed Mahomes. Would you agree with that? I know he had an interception, but I thought he looked tremendous both before and after he got dinged up.
I think Herbert was very solid the whole game. I think Mahomes really turned it up towards the end of the game, but kind of in the beginning he was kind of just very mediocre play. But it happens to the best of the quarterbacks, so it is what it is. But I do think Justin Herbert definitely was the best quarterback the whole game. I mean, his only real mistake was throwing the interception, which happened because of a miscommunication. It was partially Jared Everett they miscommunicated, and also he just threw a bad pass. It was a combination, and that was the only real mistake. But other than that, Herbert was definitely the superior quarterback this game.
Yeah, I thought he played terrifically. I thought Mike Williams had a great game filling in for Keenan Allen at wide receiver 1 as well. Everett, I really like. I was building him up before the season, and the first 2 games, he's shown that he can be a number 1 tight end. I think. I think it's interesting that. And you mentioned that pick 6 by Jalen Watson. I believe is he undrafted rookie? Is that what he was, or 7th round?
I think he was a late round drafter.
Yeah, 7th rounder maybe. Filling in for Trent McDuffie, who's on IR right now. He really made a name for himself in this game. What did you think of the defenses in this game? Because I thought it was actually, even though the score was kind of high, I thought the defenses on both ends were pretty solid throughout the game, especially in that first half.
Oh, I agree. I think both defenses were very good, which is why the score was so close as well. It just goes to show you how well-rounded both teams are, because even the defenses are so good, the offenses are just as high-powered. So it's very much an even matchup throughout the game, which is what made it really fun to watch.
Yeah, I agree. I wasn't expecting J.C. Jackson to come back. I thought he was supposed to be out 4 weeks, and all of a sudden he was playing last night. So that's good news for the Chargers, for sure. I think the only other thing I really wanted to touch on in this game, why do you think did you notice how poor the run games were? The Chiefs barely ran the ball, and the Chargers, while they did give Eckler 14 carries, and then they gave 8 carries combined to Kelly and Michelle, they were running the ball a little bit more than the Chiefs were, but they couldn't really get much going either. Like, do you think these teams need to unlock their running game more? Because right now, for the first 2 weeks, I feel like it's mostly just been the pass game for these two teams.
Yeah, I do think they do, but I also don't think like it's super concerning because I think these teams have mostly, for the like most part, regardless, lived by the passing game since then. You know what I mean? There's that short period of time where Kareem Hunt was still on the Chiefs and they were very much run heavy at that point. But ever since he's been gone, they've very much diversified. And, Herbert and the Chargers, I think, is a similar way. Even though they have Eckler, who's a stud, I don't think like it just really depends. But I do think that we're going to see more Austin Eckler and Clyde Edwards-Helaire because I think Clyde Edwards-Helaire has really played well so far this year. Even in the game, like he didn't do much, but when he got his carries or passes, he did do pretty well.
Yeah, I'm really happy with their use of Clyde because we heard coming out LSU his biggest strength was his third down pass catcher ability out of the backfield. He's a solid runner as well, but I don't think he's really been unlocked as a pass catcher in these first two games. He had the 2 touchdowns last week, and even though yes, he only had 4 catches in this game, that was still second most on the team besides Kelsey. So I think they've really made a point to utilize him, and I like that for him a lot. I think he's going to have a big year.
For sure. I agree.
Yeah. With that out of the way, let's talk about the rest of this week two slate that hasn't yet unfolded yet. We'll make some picks here because, week one was, I think we can agree, was a lot of fun, a big roller coaster of a weekend. And I'm hoping we get some similar results this weekend. And we can start. Look, I just pulled up the games. I guess I don't know what the order they're in, but we can start here. Steelers hosting the Patriots on Sunday at 1. Steelers got that big win in overtime over the Bengals in one of the wackier games we've seen. Your Dolphins just obliterated the Patriots. It could have been more of a blowout, but that's notwithstanding. Steelers, Pats, who you got?
I think the Steelers are a much better team. I think the Patriots are very bland offensively and defensively, for being honest. I mean, even their best defensive player, Matt Judon, was held in check basically the whole game because it's around Armstead. So, I mean, this Patriots team is very bland. I think the Steelers are definitely the much better team in this scenario, even with missing TJ Watt. I think that defense is still pretty good.
Yeah, TJ Watt, at least he's not out for the season as we learned, but he is going to be out at least a month or two here. I agree. I think the Steelers defense is still pretty strong. I think they're going to be able to win against Watt. I think bland is a great way to describe this Patriots team, especially the offense. Last year the Patriots made the playoffs, but I think their run game was styled a lot better last year, and they also had McDaniel still calling plays. Now, as we've touched on, they have Patricia, who's a defensive coach, as basically the offensive coordinator. They also lost a lot of defensive pieces, including J.C. Jackson, as we mentioned. So, yeah, I think the Steelers take this. I agree with you there. So we're in agreement. Steelers over Patriots. Here's an interesting game. Giants hosting the Panthers. Giants got a nice feel-good win over the Titans, that 2-point conversion. Plus the missed field goal by Bullock allowed them to win the game. Panthers coming off a close loss to Cleveland. Who you got in this one?
I don't want to start hyping up the Giants just yet because I think they were kind of handed a win because Tennessee kind of played awful, and they ended up missing the field goal. But I don't think the Panthers are anything amazing just yet. They did play a little better towards the end of the Browns game, and ultimately they did lose the game because of the referees. So I think this is a very even matchup because I do think the Giants have the potential to be a decent team this year. I'm not entirely sure which team I pick, although I want to say the Panthers just because I think they played a little better overall compared to the Giants, who played a team who was not playing excellently last week. So I want to see if the Giants can repeat on that performance.
That's a fair pick. And, in our preseason preview episode, I did say I had the Panthers. I thought they could be a sleeper team, win about 8 games this season, kind of compete. And yet I'm kind of going to go the opposite way here and pick the Giants to start 2-0. I loved what I saw from Saquon. I've been high on him for months now, and I was glad to see it come to fruition in week 1. I think getting the 2 pass rushers back, Kayvon Thibodeau will make his debut most likely, as well as Azeez Ojulari will come back. I really think the Panthers, I think this could actually be a more high-scoring game than expected. I think the Panthers will get Christian McCaffrey and DJ Moore more involved this week. I wouldn't worry about Robbie Anderson. That most of his yards came from that one play, so I wouldn't worry too much about him. But nonetheless, I kind of just like Brian Dable as the coach. I like Saquon, and I think their defense is kind of underrated as much as I also like the Panthers defense. So I'm going to go with the Giants in a close one. I could see this being like a 24-21 game, somewhere around there. So I'm going to go Giants. So we
That's
disagree
totally
on
fair.
that.
I
Yeah, for
mean, yeah, we
sure.
disagree, but I get where you're coming from. I think it's going to be a good game to watch. I think it could go either way. So,
Yeah, definitely. Another game that could possibly go either way here is Cleveland, who just picked up a win over the Panthers last week. They're hosting the other New York team, the Jets, this week at 1 o'clock in Cleveland. Two backup quarterbacks going at it, Jacoby Brissett and Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco passed 59 times in the week 1 loss to the Ravens, which was kind of crazy to see. Who do you got winning this with the Jets being 0-1, Browns looking for their second win?
honestly, this is a tough one. But I think we're gonna have to pick the Browns because I think the Browns showed that so far they're a better team. The Jets, as of now in the season, are still the same old Jets. They didn't really play that great, so that remains to be seen. I think the Browns are a little bit of a better team right now, but I could see the Jets possibly pulling an upset if they start getting the run game involved more. They have Michael Carter and Brees Hall back there. They
Yeah.
should definitely take advantage of that. So that remains to be seen as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think I'm going to go with the Browns here. I think the defense, led by Myles Garrett, led by Denzel Ward, who did at least had a hand in stopping DJ Moore last week. I think that defense is still really good despite the offensive struggles. I liked how we talked about this earlier in our most recent podcast, but the Jets did kind of play well. It's just the quarterback positions kind of holding them down because yes, Flacco passed a lot, but that also passing a lot led to some ugly drives as well as some prosperous ones. So the volume
Yeah.
helped the fancy stats, but in terms of the actual football effect of the Jets, there wasn't so strong. So I'm going to go with the Browns here. I think their run game, even though you mentioned how the Jets' run game has the potential to be really good, but I really like that Browns run game already, of course, with
Yeah.
Chubb and Hunt. So I agree with you. I'm going to go Browns here. So here's an interesting matchup. The rematch of the wild week 18 game from last year, Jacksonville and Indianapolis. Obviously, the last time these teams met, Carson Wentz, he just melted down, and Jacksonville was able to upset them. Now, Jacksonville coming off a close loss to Washington, Colts coming off the tie with the Texans. Who do you got in this game with Jacksonville being the home team?
Honestly, I'm gonna throw a surprise pick in there. I think it's gonna be the Jaguars.
Wow. Okay.
Judging by their past performances, I think that the Jaguars so far are a better team. And yeah, I know the Jaguars lost, but honestly, I thought they played great in the Commanders game. I really, like I said last week in the episode, I really liked the Commanders Jaguars game. I thought it was really fun to watch. I think both teams played pretty well. It's very much back and forth. As for the Colts, they seemed kind of anemic on both sides of
Yeah.
the ball during that last game for the Texans. It very much should have been a blowout for them. They should not have lost, or I mean, tied with the Texans. They easily should have beat them. So as of now, I'm sure the Colts have the potential to still be good, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Colts win. But as of now, I think that the Jaguars have proven they're a little better because the Colts have kind of dropped the ball in week 1.
Yeah, I do like this Jags team. I think they got some young talent that looked good in week 1. I'm not ready to jump off this Colts because I think, I picked them to be the easy winners of that division. I'm going to stick by it for another week. I think Matt Ryan's going to have a better game this week. I think Jonathan Taylor will follow in Derrick Henry's footsteps and just destroy the Jacksonville Jaguars pretty easily. I like Michael Pittman. He showed out in week 1. So I'm going to go with the Colts here. I think they're going to get the win, and the Jags, unfortunately, are going to start 0-2 nonetheless. So now we can get to maybe the best game of the 1 o'clock hour. Although Bucs Saints, which we'll get to in a sec, also has an argument. But this is your Dolphins on the road for the Ravens, which could be the most exciting game of the weekend. Now, what do you think of this? Because your Dolphins are coming off a nice win over the Patriots. Ravens coming off a big win over the Jets. Both blowouts. Who do you think can win here?
I honestly think the Dolphins. I've seen a lot of Lamar Jackson, the Ravens players talking to the media saying, "Oh, we've done a lot of film study. We're ready for this team, what they threw at us last year." But I think they're also forgetting that this is a different team from last year. This is a better team on both sides of the ball somehow still. So I think we do have a chance to beat them. I'm going to pick the Dolphins, but I do think the game could go either way. So I don't want to start projecting that we're going to win the league, but
Yeah.
I think the Ravens are going to give us a good fight, but I do think it's very possible we beat them because I think we're still a better team overall.
Yeah, so I'm tempted to pick the Ravens, but I'm actually going to agree with you with Miami here because I don't trust the Ravens skill position guys still. Their run game is like I know Dobbins is supposed to play this week, but I just don't trust him. The guy hasn't played in a long time. I don't trust Kenyon Drake and Mike Davis as the veterans who are kind of just like last year with Devontae Freeman and Latavius Murray. It feels like they're just along for the ride because the Ravens need to fill the roster with running
Yeah.
backs because Gus Edwards is still not ready to play. And outside of Andrews and Bateman, I don't really trust these other receivers. No, I don't even care that Devin Duvernay had 2 touchdowns last week. He only had 4 catches, and most of the yards came from a big play. So
Yeah.
I'm not sold on him. And I think with Marcus Peters especially still expected to be out, I think the Ravens can't cover your both of your receivers. I think the Dolphins pass game is going to be what wins you this game. So I got the Dolphins.
Oh, absolutely. I totally agree. I do like what the Ravens young receivers showed from us, but I just think that like our first four wide receivers are just better overall. I mean, Tyreek Waddle, Cedric Wilson, even Trent Sherfield, I think it's great. I think
Mhm.
he's a little underrated. Gesicki sadly was not involved in the game plan last week, but I do think that this is his chance.
Yeah.
Because I do like the Ravens safeties. They got Marcus Williams back there. They signed him. He's pretty good. But I think he has a chance to feast on a guy like Kyle Hamilton, who's not necessarily the best in coverage, especially against someone strong who's going to push back against him. So I think Gesicki is primed to have a good game, but it remains to be seen if he gets involved in the game plan.
Yeah, I hope he does because not only is he a Penn State product, but he's also a good player. And I know the contract situation is a question mark, but I hope nonetheless that he gets into the game plan this week for sure. So we both agree Dolphins are going to take the win. So your Dolphins could be on to a 2-0 start. I'm sure you're excited about that.
Very excited.
So another game that I'm excited for, a divisional showdown. Saints host in Tampa. They're 4-0 in the regular season during the Tom Brady Tampa Bay era. Obviously, they did lose in the playoffs 2 years ago. Saints got a nice comeback win over the Falcons. Tampa only 1 touchdown, but Dallas was so incompetent offensively that they still won the game pretty decisively. This game is big, I think, for the rest of the season for these two teams. Who do you got winning this one?
Honestly, I think the Saints could beat the Buccaneers. Even though the Buccaneers beat the Cowboys by 16, the Cowboys suck. They were a terrible
Yeah.
team. They played sloppy. On top of the fact that the bad team, they didn't play well either.
Right.
Mike Evans and Chris Godwin are both injured. Their best wide receiver right now is Russell Gage and Julio Jones. And I'm excited that Julio Jones is back. I really love Julio Jones. I think he's all time great. And it's exciting to still see him playing in the back end of his career this good. But
Mhm.
I don't think the Buccaneers showed us anything special. They did not play amazing. They kind of just played good enough to win. And I don't think that's going to bode well against a better team like the Saints.
The Bucks are very banged up right now, and I think that's a real concern. And I think the Saints defense is going to take advantage of these banged up offensive players because I think Mike Evans is going to play. Some people are making jokes on Twitter that Mike Evans just trying to get out of another matchup with Marshawn Lattimore. I don't know if that's true, but it looks like he's going to play. But it looks like him and Julio are both dealing with injuries. I don't think Godwin is even going to play. It seems, and if all these guys are banged up, this Saints secondary is pretty good. I think this could be a nice win for the Saints, a real feel good win for the Saints. And I really think that I'm going to go with the Saints as well. I think they're going to get I don't know if it's seen as an upset. Some people might see it as an upset. I don't. I think the Saints and Bucks are pretty evenly matched for the most part. But the difference here for me is Tampa seems pretty unhealthy. So I'm going to go Saints here. I think they're going to pull it out. I think James is going to get a nice revenge win over Tampa Bay.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with that.
Another game that could be a lot of fun. We saw the Commanders in a fun one with Jacksonville last week. Another team who could help them produce an entertaining game is the Detroit Lions, who did score 35 points despite the loss to the Eagles last week. Lions are home in this one. I'm excited to see if this Washington receiving core can carry over what they did last week into the second for a second straight performance. But also the Lions with Swift and Hawkinson and Amon-Ra and Chark look good. I think they got a lot of talent as well. It's the matchup of Wentz and Goff, the two guys from that draft, top two picks that are both kind of at a crossroads in their career. So who do you think? Which one of those quarterbacks do you think can elevate the talent around them this week to get the win?
I think Wentz is just in terms of like quarterback play, he's just a better quarterback. He's not as limited as Jared Goff is.
Uh-huh.
He's got a better deep ball. He's a little bit more athletic. He's got He's got a good cast of receivers around him. I mean, he's got some of the best. He's got Terry McLaurin, who's one of the best in the league. He's got some of the best like young guys in Jahan Dotson. So I think the Commanders and Lions are very evenly matched because I would say the Lions also have good receiving core, good run game, good tight end. But
Mhm.
I think the Commanders are just a better team in terms of their defense as well.
I agree with that take. I think Commanders do have a better defense. My thing here is that I kind of still like the Lions though, and they're 0-1. Like I have them winning somewhere around 7 games. So I'm gonna go with the Lions here. I'm gonna pick them because they're home. I think the Lions do have a nice home field advantage, but I think this could be a shootout here. I think this could weirdly be an entertaining game, maybe one of the
For
more
sure.
high scoring games of the week. I like both of these teams. They just got skill guys I like. So I'm going to take them in a close one. That could be a really entertaining showdown. So moving on to another divisional matchup, the Niners and the Seahawks. So we saw Seattle with Geno get a nice feel-good week 1 win. We already talked about that amazing post-game press conference quote that he had. And then the Niners coming off that loss to the Bears in the rain. That was a weird game. 19-10 was the score. Niners are home for this one. Who you got in this one? I'm leaning Niners here.
Yeah, I think although it was nice that the Seahawks got a win, I think it's more just that the Broncos kind of underestimated them and they
Yeah.
played a little sloppy. And Nathaniel Hackett was not on this game, so I think that's kind of why the Seahawks are good. I don't think they're going to be a terrible team this year. I think they'll get a few wins, but I think they're going to come down to earth a little bit against the 49ers team, who's also looking for their first win. And they're going to be hungry for that, and I think they are just the better team overall.
Yeah, I agree. I think 49ers will win this game. I think Kittle should be back. So they'll have Debo and Kittle to use as weapons. Jamal Adams out for the season. So that's a loss in the secondary for Seattle. I also, as much as I want to root for Geno, I just don't think he can get it done against this Niners defense. I think he's going to have some trouble in this divisional matchup. My thing with Trey Lance is I'm willing to give him the whole season to prove himself. I might disagree with the fact that he's starting over Garoppolo. I might have just wanted Trey Lance to take another year as a backup. But if he is going to start, he's one of the youngest starting quarterbacks in league history. And last week is only his third start ever. I'm willing to give him time to develop. I saw a lot of people talking that like, oh, Trevor Lawrence, he was considered one of the most pro-ready quarterbacks, and everyone's giving him a pass. And I think he should get a pass, to be honest. I think he should be allowed to develop. But if he gets to develop, then Trey Lance, who a lot of people considered a project of sorts, I think he should be given a lot more of leniency than he's been given so far. So I'm going to give him a chance here, and I think he'll get his first win as the full-time starter this week.
I think people are just they're too ready to phone it in on him, and I think it's kind of unfair because he's just a young player. I think people forget that like not all quarterbacks or not all rookies in general are just going to come out and just start being the best player on the team.
Yeah.
Everyone's going to be a Justin Jefferson. Some people need time to develop, and I think Trey Lance definitely deserves that as well. I mean, a lot of people gave Trevor Lawrence a pass. So why not Trey Lance?
I hope the Niners, I hope he at least shows something this week. I don't want him to keep getting slandered like he was last week, even though that was a weird game. So moving on to what I think could be a real big blowout, despite what the Rams looked like last week. That's the Rams hosting the Falcons. I know the Falcons had a nice, they at least got up early on the Saints before blowing the lead, as they always do. But we talked about in our NFC preview that we think the Falcons roster is one of the least talented in the league in terms of depth, all that stuff. And I know Kyle Pitts was pretty non-existent last week, but even if he has a better game this week, I think the Rams, they need this win. I think they're going to get it. I think they're going to win decisively over the Falcons.
For sure, I agree. I do like what the Falcons did against the Saints. Ultimately, they did lose, so they definitely need to work on not choking so often. But the Rams definitely had a misstep last week. I think they're going to come back. I don't know how good the Rams are going to be overall this season because it wasn't promising what we saw from them, especially now that their offensive line is even more banged up after the game because they lost Brian Allen. It's not promising for the Rams, but I do think they'll win. But I don't know how I feel about the rest of their season.
It'll be interesting to see how the run game shakes out as well. Like, will Cam Akers get more carries, or will he only be a bit part player once again? I'm not sure.
Like the whole Cam Akers thing, I saw apparently he just he's kind of been showing up late to practices and stuff and not putting in effort. So I think he's kind of taking the fact that people predicted him to be the starter for granted.
I do like Henderson a lot, but at the same time, I would like to see Cam Akers maybe. If that's true, what you're talking about, I would like to see him get his head on straight and compete with Henderson because I think he's a really talented player. He showed a lot before that injury last year. So I'm hoping they can get it together. I see no reason why the Rams can't beat the Falcons. And if they don't, yeah, they could be in real big trouble for this season. So, but I anticipate them to win. So moving on, we got the Cardinals visiting the Raiders in Vegas this week. Who do you got in this one? This could be a high scoring affair as well, as long as both teams come to play.
This could be, but on the Cardinals, I'm not really sold yet on them. I
Yeah,
like some of the Cardinals players. Like I think Kyler Murray has a good chance to be a good quarterback, but he hasn't really put it all together. I think the Raiders are just a better team. The Raiders also didn't show up in week one, but I think the Raiders are still a better team, and they've got a more mature quarterback at the helm. So I think that the Raiders are probably going to win this game.
I agree with you. I talked about this when we talked about the AFC West before. I do like the Raiders offense. I think it was a weird game for them with the Chargers. I think that game should have been like high scoring, more high scoring for both sides, and it just wasn't. But I think that's a testament to the Raiders defense that at least like the high end players on that team are going to help them at least be respectable. The O line is obviously an issue, but I don't see this Cardinals team having much of a pass rush anymore with JJ Watt declining, with Chandler Jones now on the Raiders. So it'll be interesting to see. I think the Raiders pick up a win here. I think Devontae Adams will feast on that secondary. So I'm going to go Raiders as well. So moving on to another game here that could be a blowout, another AFC West team. Broncos hosting the Texans. Texans coming off that tie last week. Davis Mills looked good, but I also think there was a lot of issues, as we touched on our last podcast, for the Texans. I think the coaching, who's playing, who's not, that's an issue at times. So I think Denver will probably win this pretty easy. I think they'll be a lot more in sync this week. What's your take on this game?
Yeah, I think the Broncos are just the better team. I think they're going to bounce back a little bit from the Seahawks. I think they underestimate the Seahawks. I don't think they're going to do that again with the Texans. As for the Texans, they didn't play amazingly last week, so like it's not a great team. So if the Broncos even just play good, they should win this game pretty easily.
I agree. Hopefully, Broncos country, Les Ride can get their first win of the season because that was what's supposed to happen last week. It didn't happen. Last game of the afternoon before we get to the primetime games here. Bengals visiting Cowboys. We've already talked about the Cowboys both this episode and last episode. They're not going in a good direction with all these injuries, especially to Dak. I think the Bengals are going to pretty much get an easy win here. A nice bounce back from their loss to the Steelers. Do you agree with that?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't really have a lot to say about this game because I do think it's just very much going to be a Bengals win. Even though Joe Burrow played awful last game, he threw 4 interceptions. The team still played pretty well outside of that. Like the run game took a little bit to get going, but the receivers were still popping off most of the game. So I think against the Cowboys team that's banged up in terms of losing its quarterback and also just lost a lot of its good players this offseason, I think the Bengals should easily win and they're going to have a bounce back game, like you said.
So moving on to our primetime games, Packers, Sunday night football, hosting the Bears. I feel like the NFL is just giving us a free win here. And I'm not saying that to just as much about the Bears as it's just like the Packers on Sunday night football against a division rival that, as Aaron Rodgers says, we own them. We still own them. I feel like this is the perfect game to play after that loss last week. I think with Lazard coming back and hopefully I don't know, some more urgency from everyone else on the team that isn't the running back crew, which I thought was really the only people that looked good in that game. I think we'll win this. I don't think the Bears are a good team despite the win over the Niners. I think that they just took advantage of the conditions and the fact that they had a home crowd in those conditions. I like Justin Fields. I'm not really rooting against him for any reason other than that he's on the Bears. But as we've touched on, his offensive line and his receiving core is really bad, and it's going to really hurt his career, I think. And I think that starts this week. I think the Packers get a nice win over the Bears in prime time.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. I think just like kind of like the Bengals game, I don't think there's a lot to say about this one, but I do agree that I think the Bears might give a little fight. I think they're going to show that they're at least a decent team because I do think that, yes, they took advantage of the setting that they were in to play the 49ers last week, but I still think that they showed that they have potential as a team. So I think they'll give a little fight, but I do think the Packers will still easily win by like 2 touchdowns probably.
I'm in agreement. I think we're going to get a nice win here to get our first win of the season. So moving on to the two Monday night games. What's the deal with this? So apparently, usually they have 2 Monday night games week one, and then they go away from that. But apparently this year, they're going to have a number of weeks where there's 2 Monday night games. I hate this because Bills Titans starts at 7:15, but the Eagles and Vikings start at 8:30. like I don't want to watch both games at the same time. I'll probably watch Eagles Vikings, so probably we'll skip the second half of the Bills game. What's your thought on this weird schedule making?
I don't mind it. Nothing wrong with more football, but I do agree it's kind of weird that like the Bills Titans game isn't a little earlier in the day at the very least. I think
Yeah,
it should be starting around like 6:15 maybe.
right.
But it is what it is. It's more football. It's gonna be exciting. Probably gonna watch the Eagles Viking game more though, because that's probably definitely the better game. But
Yeah,
as for the Titans and Bills, I think the Bills are gonna have a pretty resounding win over the Titans. Yeah, the Bills in recent years have struggled against the Titans. They've lost to them, I think, two of the last seasons. But I think the Titans did not play well. Week one, they played awful, quite frankly, and the Bills played amazingly. So I see no reason why the Bills should lose this game. If they do lose this game, that's not a great sign, but I don't think they will.
yeah. I think what the Bills did to the Rams is if they did that to LA and that defense, this Titans team could be in some trouble. Not that the Titans have a terrible defense by any means, but I don't know. I think the Bills are here to kick ass and take names this year.
Yeah.
And I think they're, as I said, I think they're going to be the one seed in the AFC. There are a lot of people's Super Bowl pick. Yeah, I think they're going to get a nice resounding win here against Tennessee. So finally, to wrap up here, Eagles Vikings. I'm so excited for this game. I love an
Yeah.
Eagles Vikings game. All my Eagles friends, we have a nice pact I always talk about. The Eagles beat the Vikings, the Packers beat the Cowboys. It's a nice little marriage there. Goes back to that NFC title game where the Vikings fans made a mockery of themselves by doing the skull chant on the art museum steps, only to lose like 48-7 or 38-7, whatever it was. So Eagles are home for this season opener in Philly. Who do you got winning this one?
This is gonna be a good game. I really like the Eagles, but I think the Vikings showed that they're actually gonna be a pretty good team this year. Surprisingly, I didn't think the Vikings were gonna show out like that, but they did. And I think it's gonna be a good game. I think the Eagles are still a better team a little bit overall. I think they're a little more well-rounded, especially in their secondary. I don't think the Vikings have an amazing secondary. But I think it's gonna be a fun game to watch. I think Justin Jefferson versus that Eagles secondary is gonna be pretty fun. Hopefully, the Eagles secondary learns from the Packers' mistakes week one and tries to cover him a little better. So,
Well, yeah, it would for example, maybe Darius Slay should cover Justin Jefferson. Not
yeah,
rocket science there, but maybe they should go with
yeah,
that. I think this Eagles defense is really good. I think that people are making a lot of that 35 points allowed. I think that Jared Goff has proven in his career that he is the merchant of the fourth quarter. He gets garbage time stats, and that's what happened in that game. I think the Eagles defense was playing really well to start that game, and I think they're going to come to play against the Vikings. I got the Eagles winning this. I think the Philly crowd's going to be electric. I'm definitely not biased at all. 100% not biased in my pick here. But I also do think the Eagles are the better team. I did say that they are my one seed prediction in the NFC. So do you agree with me, or do you think the Vikings can steal this one?
I mean, the Vikings could win, but I do think the Eagles overall are just a much better team. So I think not much better, but they're better. And I think they're definitely going to win because I just think that they're more well rounded, like I was talking about. I think the defense on the Vikings is not as good as it could be. I think the Packers just didn't play well last week, which is why we didn't really see a dismantling of the Vikings defense. But I don't love their defense either. They lost Barr. Patrick Peterson's their quarterback number one. We'll see about that one, but yeah, I know it's not promising for them so far.
I agree. I think the Eagles Vikings game will probably be the best game of this week, along with maybe your Dolphins against the Ravens. But I'm really excited to see what goes down on Monday Night Football. So that's going to do it for our week 2 predictions. Before we go, I'll let you go first because I have some Packers stuff I want to talk about. But do you have any topics about the Dolphins that you want to address coming in this week?
I'm a little worried about the offensive line because Austin Jackson's on IR now, so he's gone at least 4 weeks.
Mhm.
But I think we're gonna be able to figure something out. At least if we're an okay offensive line, that's fine by me. I would like to see Gesicki involved in the offense. It was kind of a shame he wasn't because he honestly could have feasted on the Patriots defense. He just wasn't in the offensive game plan, so I don't know what's up with that. I would like to see. I don't know. I want to see some of the cornerbacks step up. We did see one of our undrafted free agents,
Yeah,
Kadarko. He's really
yeah.
stepped up in that game, but I really want to see like the other guys as well show up in that cornerback room because X is going to need all help he can get until Byron Jones come back. But also just because I want someone to like show that they can replace Byron Jones because I do think that even though we're paying Byron Jones a lot of money, he's very much just an average
Yeah.
cornerback. He's not amazing. He was just the best cornerback on the market, so we had to overpay him. But I'm really hoping that someone can show up and be like, hey, maybe you can cut back on him, trade Byron Jones away, just someone to show that we don't really need him anymore because he's kind of expensive.
Yeah, I think that would be a good move for the Dolphins going forward. I think that would definitely be an easy way to save some salary cap, especially with guys like Waddle and maybe Tua coming up for extension soon. So yeah, I think that's an interesting move. I think that it's going to be interesting to see how the Dolphins O line holds up because the run game was pretty bad week one. So I'm hoping they can do a little better this week for you
Yeah.
guys. So I just wanted to talk about this very, very annoying topic going on in the Packers media this week. So Aaron Rodgers had a little press conference, as he does every week. He meets with the media. For some reason, people, when Aaron Rodgers talks, for some reason it's out of the normal. Like every NFL star player has to talk to the media every week, including Aaron Rodgers. So I don't know every time why Aaron Rodgers opens his mouth, people act like he's like punishing us. He's like, I'm going to talk and give my opinion. It's like, no, he does what every other NFL player does, go to the press conferences and talks. So that's what he did. And he was talking about a lot of things. He said some good things about Romeo Doubs and Christian Watson. And everyone's comparing it to this thing he said about Amari Rodgers because someone asked him about Amari Rodgers' role in the offense. And he said, well, he's returned punts for us right now. That's all I got to say about that. And yes, could he have put it a little nicer? Most likely, but he only spent 5 to 10 seconds answering that question. He clearly didn't want to bury the guy. It's not like he said Amari isn't working hard, Amari isn't good, yada yada. He didn't really say anything good, but he didn't say anything bad either. And everyone is making such a big deal about this. But the part that disappoints me the most, that I think I've seen Packers media and Packers fans complaining about this more than the Vikings haters of Rodgers and people like that. And it's a topic that's really annoying me because I've been on Twitter. I'm on Twitter all the time. It's my chronic illness. And I just have been reading Amari Rodgers takes for 5 days now, and I just couldn't care less. We have 6 guys that are ahead of Amari Rodgers for various reasons. Randall Cobb is Randall Cobb. He's a legend of the franchise. Aaron Rodgers loves him. We brought in Sammy Watkins to be a veteran. He's going to play. Lazard's coming back. He's our wide receiver 1. He's going to play over him. Then we got Doubs and Watson, who we've invested a lot. Like Watson's second round pick. Doubs had a really good camp and he looked kind of solid week 1. Those 2 young guys have proven to be better than Amari Rodgers. So then it comes down to Amari Rodgers and freaking Juwann Winfree, who was on the practice squad and got called up. If Juwann Winfree is playing over Amari Rodgers, that tells me more about Amari Rodgers than Juwann Winfree. To me, Amari Rodgers, not only has he not really proven much as a returner, he's our returner every week, but he's not even that good. But as a receiver, everyone's like, he didn't play any offensive snaps. The guy might just be a draft bust. I don't know why it's such a bad thing that our wide receiver 7 isn't getting snaps. I don't know why this is an Aaron Rodgers problem. Everyone wants to make this out as like Aaron Rodgers hates Amari Rodgers and he's telling Matt LaFleur not to play him. It's like, first of all, it's probably more about what Matt LaFleur and Tom Clements are seeing from Amari Rodgers than what Aaron Rodgers sees, but no one's going to admit that. And I just wish Amari Rodgers is a second-year player, and either he's going to keep getting better as the season rolls along, it's week 1, or by season's end, he'll still be a reserve receiver who doesn't play, and we'll probably cut him after the season. Yeah. He's right now he's a nobody, and I don't know why he was such a main. There's so many things that people could talk about the Packers right now after that week 1 game. And I don't know why Amari Rodgers has seemingly become the number 1 story in Packers media this week. I hate it. Give me your take on all of that rant I just laid down. Do you think it's stupid as well, or are you?
I think the reason they're so hung up on it is probably because he was a high draft pick. He was like a 3rd round draft pick, right? Yeah. So I guess that's what's got people upset, especially because he's coming out of a school like Clemson, which is one of the higher ranked football schools. And a lot of people tout these guys as more pro ready than other schools. But I think it's fair to say that he hasn't gotten all the opportunities, but it's also fair because we definitely don't see him get the ball a lot at all in the game. He's barely ever playing. But of course, at the same time, it's probably because he's not showing anything. Yeah. So honestly, if I were the Packers, I would start playing Amari Rodgers where you were playing Juwann Winfree just to see if you have something. But if any, because you still have 5 guys ahead of him who are better. Right. So it's not it's not like he's playing a lot of snaps. So at least try to see what he can do. And if he doesn't play well, he doesn't play well. Yeah. But So I think the Packers should try to develop him a little more. But it's also probably because he hasn't shown them anything special, which is why they're just not playing him because they're trying to win games as well. So
Right. Like as you mentioned, like there's 5 receivers, not to mention Tunyon and the 2 running backs. Like he's pretty much like our 8th target right now. Like it's just how
yeah,
it is. Like some people are just not as good. I just this happened with Jake Kumaro too. And that was a little
yeah,
more about Rodgers because Rodgers himself said he wanted to keep Kumaro, but at the end of the day, Kumaro's gone to the Bills and he's pretty much in the same spot Amari Rodgers is. He's behind like 5 guys. So either way, I think both of those scenarios were pretty stupid. And I just
yeah,
think it's people love to just they love to paint Aaron Rodgers as a diva. And yes, he does do weird things sometimes. But the thing I resent the most, if you want to talk about his tattoos, his relationship with his family, who he dates, his COVID opinions, I don't really care because it's not about football. But yes, if you want to say that's weird, go ahead. But what I resent the most is when people say Aaron Rodgers is a bad teammate and they come up with these fake scenarios like Amari Rodgers to paint him that way when all the people that have been with the Packers for a long time always have good things to say about Aaron Rodgers, the leader, and Aaron Rodgers, the quarterback, unless you're Greg Jennings. In that case, you're just a traitor and a hater. We don't acknowledge you. Everybody else, though, says good things. So that's all I wanted to say. I will not be talking about the Brett Favre situation. It breaks my heart to see, but to be honest, he's had pretty irrehensible behavior for pretty much since he retired now. But
yeah,
this is definitely the worst thing he's done by
yeah,
far. Like this is kind of the other things you could kind of write off is like, oh, maybe there it's not totally true. This is true. There's evidence. It seems pretty legit. So I'm not going to talk about it because it's disappointing. I went to the Hall of Fame when Brett Favre got inducted in 2016. I was, going in the 8th grade. I met him. He was funny. I met him for like a minute, but he was nice to me. He was funny. He signed my jersey, stuff like that. So, I mean, I'm not going to just throw out all my Brett Favre stuff, but like because I think the Packers quarterback of the 90s and early 2000s probably I can't say for sure, but I feel like that's a better person than he is today. But nonetheless, it's disappointing. Definitely tarnishes his legacy. And, I wish
yeah.
people would maybe criticize him more than Aaron Rodgers. So that's what I have to say.
Yeah, no, that's totally fair. I mean, I don't obviously I'm not a Packers fan, it doesn't matter to me,
Yeah.
but it's pretty evil
Yes.
behavior to be stealing money from poor people to build your daughter a volleyball stadium. When
Yes.
by the way, the guy's rich. He doesn't like he could have donated the money. I don't think it really would have mattered. But just unredeemable behavior from Brett Favre, which is kind of a shame because he's a very excellent quarterback in terms of like the NFL, but he's done some bad things. It's kind of the same thing as a lot of guys like Lawrence Taylor. Like you love Lawrence Taylor as a player, but as a person, he's awful. I obviously have my own personal issues with Aaron Rodgers. I think he's a little bit of a diva sometimes, but I do agree with you that I think sometimes people over criticize him. I don't love him as a teammate, but I'm also not a Packers fan, so it doesn't really matter to me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I mean, Amari Rodgers, I think try to give him more chances, try to get him on the field, see what he can do. But if he's a bust, then he's a bust. What are you going to do about it? So,
I agree. Well, I think that's all I got to say about the Packers. I'm sure I'll have more rants to come, especially if we lose to the freaking Chicago Bears. So hopefully that doesn't happen. But I think we're both very confident in our teams this week. Obviously, the Dolphins got a bit of a tougher matchup, but nonetheless, I think we're very excited for week 2 here.
yeah.
Well, that's going to do it for this edition of the Fan Committee. Thank you guys for listening. Make sure to follow on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. And other than that, we're hyped for this second week of football. Hopefully it's a good one. So thanks for listening. Have a great rest of your day.